Avoidant attachment is when we feel emotionally threatened in a relationship, or we feel insecure, that our impulse is to distance. Our impulse is to keep somebody at an arm's length. And this can show up in a lot of different ways. It can show up in literally this feeling of, we got in a fight. Oh, now I'm going to go out with my friends. I'm just going to like vacate this argument and I'm just going to leave. But it can also show up in techniques like sometimes grand romantic gestures actually are a way of not being authentically intimate by consuming time with grand acts of romance opposed to having a real emotional, authentic
vulnerability instead of just being like, here I am, let's meet on this level. It's like performing.
Sure. Yeah. Am I enough right here? Just like this, something simple,
and it comes from that same place of, am I lovable? Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if I am. So I'm going to do these big things to kind of look over here.
Yeah. And then anxious attachment style is when there's conflict of this, I want to bring you closer. And I'm going to try to pull you as close as I can. But with anxiety on it, because there's fear of, if I don't have you at a certain level of intimacy, perhaps this is not going to last. And so it is fear-based.
And more clinging. And that's that was what I had to work through. Adam was more avoidant.
I think it's like 15% of the population has secure attachment. So this is not like an uncommon thing. It's rampant in our society. I think
most people are screwed up.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So it's really, really common. So don't feel bad if you identify with one of these categories. Sure. I had my own avoidant attachment stuff to work through. Elisa had her anxious attachment stuff to work through. And like we said, we're not supposed to be perfect when we come to relationship. Sure. In fact, sometimes I've seen it can be a more miraculous healing journey when you come to a relationship with all your baggage, because then if you really heal that with a person, then you build such a deep level of trust with that person.
Yeah, we have been through it, like especially in the beginning of our relationship. And normally those two styles attract each other, where you'll have somebody who's avoidant and someone who's anxious. And then you just have the anxious person, wrestling them down, pulling them in, questioning them, getting more neurotic, getting analytical, and then the avoidant person's going away and then withdrawing and coming back. And it becomes this kind of can't live with you, can't live without you, sometimes passionate, kind of like projective, can be explosive relationship. And they activate each other, right? They like feed into each other, those two styles. Oh, yeah. And if it's unconscious, it's a really bad situation. If it's conscious, it's an opportunity. It's like, look, this is actually kind of awesome because it's so at the surface, all those feelings that there's a lot of potential for healing, but it takes a certain type of, the reason we go on in the book about a healthy ego is because we don't speak of ego more yogically of annihilate the ego, get rid of the ego. We're coming more psychologically to that idea of you need a healthy ego. An ego can be good or bad, depending if it's conscious or unconscious, but a healthy ego is capable of staying when it's uncomfortable. So you need someone, and that's the human part of holy and human, of like assessing in your relationship, is this person capable of handling that emotional dissonance when those old wounds surface, and then sitting through it? Because if they can sit through it, it takes courage and it takes persistence and it takes being conscious of what's happening. If you're not conscious, then it's just like, this relationship sucks. You're not what I want. I'm not getting what I need from you, because they're uncomfortable. But if it's conscious around, actually, I really want you. And because of that desire, I'm annoyed because I'm feeling all my old family stuff in my body. And I feel terrified. And it's like, one, can you identify those feelings, which is not always, that sounds simple. People think like identifying feelings, like, yeah, of course, you know how you feel. But honestly, most people have no idea how they feel. When I used to work in rehabs, that was so shocking to me. We had a feeling chart similar to the one like we put in this book. We'd pass it around and it'd be like, pick 3 feelings that you're feeling right now off this chart. And you'd think that'd be so basic. And me, who had been through Pacific or Graduate Institute Jungian training, like you'd think I would be able to do that pretty well. And I remember getting handed the feeling chart and being like, whoa, like how because the idea of how we think we're feeling is usually different than what's actually happening in our body in the moment. So it's coming into the present moment, which takes kind of trauma withdrawing, deprogramming to do that. And then identifying, what am I? And usually it can be mixed. You can be like excited and nervous, or, inspired and terrified. So it's starting to identify those places and then bringing love and healing to the places that need attention within that. So in a relationship, there's so much going on. I see like we're like these universes and we collide together. And then you have like a third universe that's created by these two universes. And then it's like, what's that universe about in terms of the soul lessons and contracts and what is going on? And also, this might be out there for some people, but we believe it's like a soul journey. So it's also not just this lifetime.
Sure. I'm with you on
it's
that.
Broadening, right? To like, and whether you believe that or not, it's just, there's a lot going on. And so it's kind of like getting aware of like,
well, one thing I was going to say was, one of the reasons we chose the title Holy Love was because we wanted to move away from this idea that love is simply just an emotion, and that love is actually a process. So one way I think people see relationships is like love is something that you are going to go get in a relationship. And so you crave a relationship because you want that feeling. And then when you have your first conflict or are disappointed about something with your partner, then you're like, well, I didn't get that feeling, so I'm out.
I guess that's not love.
Or I'm doing something wrong, or I'm unlovable. But if we see love as a process that's happening to us, because we see love as a moment to moment thing, the way that love is showing up right now in this moment for us, for this conversation, is different than it's going to show up 30 minutes later. So you have to stay tuned to what love is. You can't predict, you can't put any rules on how love should act. You have to be open to it, receiving the intuitive information from love. So in that way, we really see love as a spiritual journey.
Yeah, that makes me think of a statement that I've heard recently that I thought, and I think it was Jordan Peterson who said it, that relationships, you could maybe even put the word love instead of it, right? Is a decision, not a discovery. And that I think there's some truth there in that, you have this situation with a person and the relationship is a decision. You're like, okay, yeah, like I'm all in. It's not just sort of like, let's just see how you act tomorrow. It's like, no. And so the hard part is like, how do we find ourselves in sync with the right person so that we don't make a bad decision?
I think we would also say, I mean, I like that, what you're saying, and I totally agree with that. And I would say for us, and it's kind of semantics, but for us, I think love is both of those things. It's you make the decision so that then you're discovering like a whole other realm of love that's a potential once you're consistent and made that real committed decision. Because I'm discovering stuff every moment with Adam, right? But it's not like discovering if I want to be here, right? It's more through our trust and through those decisions we made when it was hard, when we wanted to leave. And we had arguments in the beginning when we were working on our attachment stuff that like Adam I remember once he said to me like, I want it, because he used to fish and go up to Alaska and, do this like manly thing off by himself. And I remember when he was like, I think I want to go to Alaska and just like get out of here. But like, I can't even leave you because I know if I'm like alone in a fishing boat in Alaska, like you're still going to be there with me. Like, it was like, he was realizing that there was no getting away from the love.
I would say that's actually the moment I healed my avoidant attachment, or a piece of it was we had gotten in an argument and I had that emotional impulse to run, right? I was like, I want out. Like, and it wasn't because of anything specific. It was because my trauma was up, my inner child wounds from when I was little. And so that was activated. But then this feeling of Elisa had touched something true in me. And I knew that if I had left her, that I would almost be haunted by her experience, because it would be like, oh, there was this thing that was true that I missed out on. And so I realized in that moment that there was no escape in a way. It was the wisdom of no escape of one. And I think, we all talk about how we want love. We're all like, we want love. We want the perfect relationship. But what most people don't realize is that love reveals all of our wounds. Love brings up all the places we feel like we're not loved and where we have self-beliefs that we're not loved. So it's really hard. But to get to your question about how do you know it's that person, right? How do you know that this is somebody that's worth investing in and worth building that trust to go through all the wounds with? We have a huge section of our book dedicated to trying to recognize who is a soul match for you. And so that is taking a lot, all our dating websites focus on egoic traits for making matches for people. They're like, oh, what are your hobbies? What's your personality type? What, what's your religion? There's
what do you think you want?
So it's based off of all of egoic traits and characteristics, and not to dismiss those, because those are important too. But what we lack, I think, as a culture is being able to inherently sense somebody's essence of who they are on an energetic level. So not who they are based on their actions or their words, but who they are as a soul. So we really see one metaphor we use in the book is it's like complementary colors. Like you can be with somebody and your color feels less vibrant and it kind of loses its hue. But if you're with a soul that matches, you usually have a feeling of more life force, of more energy. And so we bring it to a somatic level of really trying to deprogram your beliefs of what you think a relationship should be and see if you can get into a emotionally aware place of becoming aware of that biofeedback from another person.
Somatic just means how it feels in your body. How does that feel? And we have a whole chapter on tough love, because it's not sometimes loving information is to leave. Because sometimes, and I think that's really hard sometimes for people, because the idea of being spiritual or compassionate is kind of like, sometimes people interpret that as I'll enable anything, I'll stay, even if the person
positive.
Yeah. And I'll just like not necessarily see what's happening. But if something's really toxic or really unhealthy, then you have to kind of listen to love about not enabling or potentially leaving. But I think we're so realistic about where the human is capable, because even if you have some wonderful soul connection, if in that lifetime that person is, because of the nature of their trauma, and if they're also just not going to care about healing, basically, right? Like if they have the trauma and they don't want to do the work, you can only get so far.
Yeah.
It is we have this personal accountability of like, are we going to choose? Because it's hard sometimes to stay and open to love when your stuff's triggered. So it's kind of like also being realistic with like, is this person capable of hanging when the stuff gets tough, or are they going to project out and be like, well, maybe it's just you.
Yeah.
Because you can only go so far then in that case.
Yeah. You can only go as far as you're healing, essentially. And, if you can't make peace with yourself, it's hard to make peace with the other person.